far too often we have confused masculinity with someone being an alpha male, right? I know I've seen like a lot of posts and a lot of different conversations that talks about masculinity, but within that conversation, there's this narrative of what if he's an alpha male, or, or an alpha in per se, that comes into play in the conversation. But what I want to break down to us to understand the uncut truth and the miseducation of our culture is that masculinity is no way, shape, or form in the same realm of what alpha and beta and all of that is concerned. It's not the same. But I'm gonna break that down to you. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about it. Masculinity. Just because someone says they are alpha, or just because you see someone or you vision someone as being an alpha male, it does not mean by any means that they exude the principles and the principalities of masculinity. I'm your host, Sam J, and this is Black Men in Suits, the Uncut Truth. I bring this topic to a discussion because I've seen so many platforms and so many um, narratives out there right now that talk about, whenever they're talking about men and leadership and the formalities of such, we seem to throw out the terms alpha and masculinity. Uh, so of course we have the submission part, right? But we're not going to talk about that. But I want to talk about is what I've seen recently is the conversation that involves masculinity. You know, just so much uncut truth and miseducation of our society. And you're going to hear me talk about that a lot. The miseducation of our society is pretty much the essence of what Black Men in Suits is about. And the uncut truth is that I expose some of the narratives that we have, talk about some of the narratives that we have, not say expose, but talk about some of the narratives that we have. And, but then I talk about what we're not discussing, you know, and the truth about some things that we're not discussing. So this is one of those bigger ones, that seems to be floating around a lot, and it seems to be correlated with the leadership dynamics that seems to be out there right now. But what I'm seeing a lot is that there's this push about I don't want an alpha man. I need an alpha man. I want an alpha man. And what I want a lot of our young ladies to understand is that masculinity does not encompass someone being considered an alpha male, right? That term, that term in general relates to behavior, alpha, right? Alpha relates to behavior. So the alpha behavior is simply just someone who feels like they have dominance over another, right? So this encompasses personalities like narcissism. You know, a person who is narcissist is considered an alpha, right? So a simplified view is one of the other traits. Uh, someone who thinks they're a top dog, think they're the game, that no one can be above them. You know, another alpha behavior is no universally attractiveness, right? And what that means is most of us, we value a person that's kind, they have a kind behavior. Alpha, people who fall in that realm of being an alpha male, men that fall in that realm of being an alpha male are not kind at all because they're very self-centered. So that term is closely related to people who exhibit behavior of narcissism, all about self. So and I think that it's very important that we understand this, because we are being, or shall I say, the latter generation is being miseducated on that. You know, they're being pumped with their dynamics, and that's not the uncut truth. You know, masculinity involves a man that knows about protecting his family, his core, his being. You know, he's very diverse. You know, he's not one size fit all. So you can't, what the state of true masculinity is, someone, if you find someone who's kind of like a renaissance man. So like if you ladies, if you run across a guy that's very uh knowledgeable about a lot of things, no matter what question you ask, he will find the answer. Or no matter what the issue is, he will try to solve it, will solve it. That's masculinity. That's masculinity, right? But we're being misguided in those terms. We're thinking that it involves a person being all about self, and they got an ego, or they the biggest in the yard. That's not masculinity. Masculinity has a lot of positive traits, such as courage, empathy, and most importantly, responsibility. So alpha don't give a damn about none of those things. That's not their trait. So masculinity evolves, or shall I say, encompass a lot of renaissance. It truly encompasses a person being well rounded. If they're not real well rounded, they lack total masculinity. So when you talk about a person being alpha, it's a person that has a lot of narcissistic traits, and everything is about self. And it's all about self, no matter what they do. Yeah, they may be spontaneous, but it's all about self. Yeah, they may be fun, but it's all about self. You get what I'm saying? And so it's very important to understand that. So no matter, in everything in their realm, in their world, is very temporary when it comes to the other person. So yeah, you may enjoy the 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 adventures when we go on this trip, but when we get back home, you got to butt up and you got to serve me. That's an alpha male. You know, you don't get no days off. You don't get no rest. You don't get no compassion because it's all about me. That's an alpha male. Alpha male is all about conquering. They're all about ruling. They're all about the game. They're all about the chase. And so what has messed a lot of women up in our society is that the thing about alpha men, they're very consistent, and so their consistency has been misguided and misjudged as them being genuine. But their consistency is all about self. It's a desire. They desire to be consistent because it's an ego. It's an ego-driven system. But a lot of women see a man being consistent as being genuine. All the while now realizing that you know what your red flags are. And not realizing that this man ignored your red flags and just continued to operate in his normalcy. Right? You know what your red flags are, but this man didn't even acknowledge your red flags. He didn't even stumble upon them. He didn't even stumble. He didn't even stop to say, hey, hold on now. Wait a minute. But he kept being consistent, kept calling, kept pursuing. But that has been the uncut truth and the miseducation of the black men and black women in our society. We have been taught to celebrate consistency, not understanding the truth that consistency does not mean true intentions, you know. And consistency is most often than none is attached to narcissism. Very much so, more than none, is attached to narcissism. So I want you guys to think about that. Take that in consumption and understand that going forward in your life, going forward in your understanding, that you understand that whenever you hear the term, I want an alpha man or alpha this or alpha that, I want you to understand what alpha really means. What it means to truly be an alpha this and an alpha that. But also what it means to be a person on a mission or a person with true masculinity when it comes to men or a man of true masculinity. But I'm your host, Sam J, and this is the Uncut Truth.